Okay, I think we can start with the proceedings this afternoon, which looks like with this daunting technology in front of us, it's not going to be a seminar, it's going to be a performance, I think. It's going to be occasion, which I gather then goes on to, through Liam here, our techno expert, it's going to go onto YouTube, and then I guess within 48 hours it'll go viral. Will it? Yeah. Okay, it's my great pleasure to introduce an old friend and colleague, Professor Wan Zawawi. A kind of pleasure to introduce him, but the sort of tinge of sadness that he's leaving us, but I'm sure he'll stay in constant and frequent contact with us. He's among one of the most prominent Malaysian senior social scientists, I should say. If you just look at his Google citations and the kinds of things he's published, and he's published very widely. I mean, I think he is eclectic, diverse in the kinds of interests that he's had. I first came across his published work in the 1980s when he was working on, we used to call them peasantries in those days.
Yes,
I think this sort of term concept has maybe gone a little bit out of favor. But his work on the Malay peasantry and the Malay labor as well, that I got to know his work. He then went on, of course, to publish on various other indigenous populations of Malaysia, the Orang Asli and Semenanjung, the indigenous peoples of Sarawak and Sabah as well. He then became, and this is where I first met him, he was very much involved in development issues and environmental change in Southeast Asia. And we first met in a conference in the Netherlands we were talking about 1990, something like that.
Or 5.
Yeah, and then he kindly contributed to an occasional paper series that I was involved in the University of Hull in Southeast Asian Studies at that time. And if I get the title right, Regional Development in Rural Malaysia and the Tribal Question. He published that with us in 1995. And then I was editing a book on environmental challenges in Southeast Asia, which came out in 1998. And Prof Wan kindly contributed an epilogue to that volume, a Southeast Asian perspective on the environment, which I much valued. And I think it's a very important paper that you wrote for us. Since then, we've done all kinds of things together. I've contributed to edited books in the Asia in Transition series with IES Springer. We've co-edited a couple of books. Oh, yes, yeah. Co-edited a couple of books together with Nurha Sharina, and this doorstep of a book on Borneo, if it has no other value, if you happen to have drafts in your apartment or house and you need to keep your door open, just shove our book against it, and I guarantee the door will not move. This is 600 pages of text. It's an enormous book. And then we did, with the kind help of Paul Carnegie, who's here, Human Insecurities in Southeast Asia. And Paul, with one, kind of rescued this book. It was kind of in the wilderness for a while. But now I think we're benefiting from that book and other things that are developing from it. I'll spend another couple of minutes. Prof Wan, I think he'll be known here, and his colleagues here and students here, for his teaching in Asian anthropology and his work on popular culture as well. If you look at some of the titles of his published work on popular culture, they're rather exciting. The Search for a New Cinema, which I think is a really good paper. Malay Contemporary Music. Disciplining rock music. How do you discipline rock music? And then for Bruneians, Malay metalheads, situating metal music culture in Brunei. You should read that. Anyway, he's not only teaching and researching in popular culture, but he actually does it, and he's going to do it this afternoon. As you know, he sings, he plays the guitar, he composes his own work. This is his swan song, and
but I'm not a swan.
This is a popular term. We use this all the time, and I had no idea what it meant. I thought, well, then I Googled it at Wikipedia, and I thought, what was a swan song? Apparently, a swan never sings. But on the eve of its departure, it breaks out into a beautiful voice. I've never heard a swan sing, anyway, but we'll hear you sing in a moment, Wan. And I think just on the paper that he's presenting us this afternoon, I think he's championed collaboration between not only scholars in Southeast Asia, but more widely in Asia. But what I think he's also done is try to bridge the gap, which I think some scholars continue to want to keep, that gap between Western scholarship and Asian scholarship. And I think Wan has done important work in trying to bring scholarship together wherever it occurs. And I think that's terribly important. And I think he's going to talk about this afternoon in Making Transnational Scholarship in the Periphery. So it's sort of over to you then, Wan, with your swan song. And I don't know when you're going to sing, later, I suppose. But before or after?
I think I'll break the ice now and sing.
Okay, you're going to sing now.
Start with... Anyway, thank you so very much, Terry, for your nice words, kind words. And thank you, my friends, my colleagues, for coming here today. I've been here, 9 years now, and this is the first time that I have actually an audience as big as this.
There you have your students.
So I'm going to begin with a song. Again, this song is called, in English, Looking for America. In Malay, it's Mencari America. When I was a kid growing in a village, we actually grew up with America, through films, through cowboy films, Hollywood films, through Tarzan, John Wayne. Then it was promoted to Rambo and the like. And then we were socialized into CNN, Newsweek magazine. So this is actually my take on America in terms of growing with America from the periphery. If you're interested in finding the original song, it's on YouTube, Mencari America, where I duetted with a Malaysian singer who is quite legendary, M. Nasir. So this song, so it's got, even though it's in Malay, it's got words, names that you know, Hollywood, Newsweek, everything. Yeah. So there it goes. A-M-E-R-I-K-A, America, America, America. Very Hollywood, CNN, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Newsweek, Time Magazine, Tusker Dynasty, Kentucky, McDonald, Tarzan, Rambo, Tarzan, John Wayne. Mencari America, Mencari America. Oh, di mana America? Oh, di sini America. Di sana America. Seluruh dunia Amerika. A-M-E-R-I-K-A, A-M-E-R-I-K-A, America, America. Dari Vietnam ke Pulau Bidong, Nagasaki ke Hiroshima, Pentagon ke CIA. Desert Storm, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Gaza, Gaza, Guantanamo Bay, Guantanamo Bay. Ku mencari Amerika, oh di mana Amerika? Ku mencari Amerika, di mana Amerika? Oh di sini Amerika, di sana Amerika, sini sana Amerika, seluruh dunia Amerika. America, 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 America. Aku mau America. Thank you. So, Broken Eyes.
That's a swan song. Okay.
Let me begin by looking at some of the keywords, at least the term scholar. Yeah, scholar in the Malay world the term is called sarjana. So we do have a term for scholarship or scholars, the sarjana. In Brunei, it's the same, but we also have orang pandai. I think my student Ron, who will be getting her PhD very soon, she did her PhD on orang pandai. She's in the back there. So orang pandai, or at least scholars, are those with knowledge, ilmu. They don't only consume, but they create knowledge, new knowledge. But in our part of the world, in Malaysia and I think in Brunei, people who work at university, like us, are normally termed as lecturers. Not lecturers, but lecturer. They always talk in terms of, use the term lecturer. I think they think that that's our job, just to teach. So I think my colleagues, in Malaysia, when they ask what you are, what do you do, and I say I'm teaching. Oh, lecturer, university. But if they don't know that what we do is just more than lecturing or teaching. I think scholarship demands different skills, and scholarship, in a sense, relates to a more rigorous kind of training, a more rigorous kind of thinking about what we do, engaging in intellectual debates, arguing over theories, arguing over knowledge, looking at epistemological issues, etc., etc. I think that's what we do. So when I talk about transnational scholarship, we're still talking about scholarship, but scholarship that extends beyond the national. So in a sense here, when I talk about transnational tradition of scholarship, it's about creating knowledge, producing knowledge in relation not just to our national colleagues who are in the same national terrain or boundary, but beyond, going beyond. I'm not denying that national tradition of scholarship is important. In the context of my own country, for instance, Malaysia, when we talk about national tradition, it's very much related to the nation state and the demands of the nation state. And that's where, in a sense, academe or scholarly work sometimes can become compromised because of state demands, power politics. And especially in the context of Malaysia, when we talk about the nation state, there is a predominant orientation towards ethnicity. So when you talk about national issues, it's always very much colored by ethnicity. In a sense, when I talk about transnational scholarship, therefore it goes beyond. It is a relationship, but it is not a relationship between nations, but between scholars in the community. We do not just belong to a community of Malaysian or Bruneian or Bangladesh scholars, but we belong to a wider global community. Of course, it is not a harmonious one. Of course, we differ in views. Even in social science, we have so many different perspectives, so many different theories. It is a very contested field. But at the same time, we believe that we can argue, we can debate, we can exchange ideas, we can reject each other's perspective on the basis of our argument, and not based on emotion, but on evidence, on theory, on database, etc., etc. But what is also important here is the internalization of transnational scholarship. I think many of my friends in Malaysia, at this university, who are socialized into national universities, and they do the PhD, say, in Malaysia, most time in Bahasa Melayu. I find that their orientation is very national. And in a sense, what I think is important for them is to also evolve, forge relationship outside the national boundary. Because transnational scholarship means getting together, bringing together the community through relationship. Relationship can be individual, like me and Terry. So it is based on individual networks rather than nations. So this is transnational scholarship actually requires the opening up of dialogues, synergy between scholars from all parts of the globe, not just from the periphery, but between periphery and center. It is still based on a sense of community. Now, in the context of this particular perspective, I have to refer to a Japanese scholar whom I met in Tokyo once on the invitation of another professor. His name is Takayame Kuwayama, who actually wrote a book on native anthropology, which was published in Australia. And he adapted his particular model from Wallerstein world system. He talks about the presence of a world system of anthropology. You can say social science. It's probably the same. And that there is a center, periphery, and a semi-periphery. And the center constitutes, of course, of the Europe, America is the American European hegemony. And the periphery, you know, Malaysia, this part of the world, but not Japan. Japan is considered as semi-periphery. So that's interesting. And of course, the relationship is asymmetrical, meaning that the center is the one that normally produces knowledge, especially theoretical knowledge. And we in the periphery are merely replicate and follow the series and replicate through our research what, in a sense, have been theorized by those in the center. So even Professor Evers, who was here, I think once wrote about the dependency of Southeast Asian scholars on theories outside. He did a kind of study on this based on this kind of statistical database and analysis. So for Takami Koyama, who actually met in Tokyo, because one Japanese professor, actually I met in Thailand, saw this book that I put out, and then he read the first chapter or so, and he found the name, a reference to Takami Koyama, who was his friend. So on the basis of that, he said, I'm going to invite you for a conference that I'm going to hold in my university, and I'm going to bring Koyama to be your discussant for your paper. So that was quite daunting. So I actually went to the university, delivered the paper, and there were others. And there was Takami Koyama, who came all the way from another university to discuss my paper. And my paper was a critique of his paper, of the world system. And interestingly, he took it very well. In fact, he wrote one article in a Japanese journal citing my extension of his particular world system model. So one of the critiques that I have about his model, it is too deterministic, static, and in a sense, it gives no room for a kind of middle ground, where periphery and center can collaborate, can come together and have a dialogue and be involved to co-produce knowledge. So he accepted that. And my argument is that I resort to a kind of Apadurayan kind of perspective, which is the idea of scapes. Because to me, scape, according to Apadura, it's flowy, it is multidirectional. It is not from center to periphery or periphery to center. It can be in any direction. It's flowy, fluid, and therefore it gets away from the dichotomy model, this dichotomy model of Takayame, which allows exchange of ideas, co-production of ideas, and mobility, very important. Mobility between scholars, or mobility of scholars, from center to periphery and periphery to center. I mean, UBD is a great example of this, of mobility, of ability of bringing in scholars from all parts of the world and to interact with the locals who are here. NUS is another good example, you know. So this is the middle ground that I feel we should take, rather than a Koyama kind of model or world system. Of course, we know that Western hegemony of ideas from Europe and America still persists, you know. But even in this context, it can still coexist with this kind of networking that cuts across periphery and center. And therefore, it very much demands on the agency, to me, of scholars, individual scholars. Scholars like, as we know, I know, Hassan, who has published many books, and we know that he has this kind of network. Professor Liha here, I'm sure. I've seen her CV, and you know, and of course, Terry, even though he's from the center, but he's not with us. So to me, the Apadurayan notion of scape, which I call social science knowledge scape, is probably more appropriate. And in Apadurai, we only have the idea of, I think, 5 global scape that he talks about. And he talks about the fluidity of flows emanating from all parts of global society, how they juxtapose with one another and touch us so many interconnected levels. So in Apadurai's writing, these flows comprise ethnoscape, technoscape, financescape, mediascapes, and idioscape. So to me, there is a missing social scape. And this social scape is what I call the social science knowledge scape. I've written this somewhere, especially in the introduction of this book, that we could consider, you know, our community as based on this kind of scape, the social science knowledge scape. And we know that the infrastructure has been laid there, which mediate the flow of this knowledge in many directions. Universities. And universities, of course, we have conferences, we have books, we have journals, international journal, local journal, regional journal, that mediate this flow of knowledge. So the infrastructure is set there. University students, even our classroom, our postgraduate, when they do research, when they go and do their conferencing. And the principle is already there. The principle of what, you know, of what academia should be. It's already there, cast in stone. You know that you can differ, but you can argue your way out based on your own interpretation, or based on theoretical interpretation and your database, etc., etc. So such a flow of knowledge, as I say, social science knowledge scape, diffuses and circulates through the usual media of seminars, conferences, journal articles, and books, including visual and digital form, in the brave new world of digital information and communication technologies. So the traditional infrastructure empowering this scape has already been in place for a long time. As I said, universities, social science, faculties, research institute, publishing companies, and their distributors, including numerous journals, books, and attendant publishing houses, which straddle both the center and the periphery of the world system. And similar to other global flows, our social science scape also harbors its own differences and disjunctures. It's also characterized by a repertoire of binary constructs, global versus social, local, center versus periphery, Orientalism and Eurocentrism, or the colonial versus Occidentalism, the anti-colonial or the other. You know? So we have all this contestation and within this particular scape And we accept it as part of social science. So despite its critical ruptures and always contested an uneven playing ground, I'm not saying it's an even playing ground, this social scientific scape has always been a laboratory of dialogical space, capable of generating its own constructive exchanges across borders, within or across nations, for collaborative work of the highest order, or for coming to terms with difference and critiques. Ultimately, it is a scape based on a universal collective. It is forged and consolidated by a certain shared critical consciousness within an epistemic community of global scholars whose modus operandi is defined by a sacred framework, the fundamental principles of which have been cast in stone. But at the crux of this scape, of this process, is the agency, I think, of personal networks among scholars, regardless of this location. So this perspective shifts the argument primarily to the strength of scholarly network and capacities forged between transnational scholars in evolving a more democratic scholarship with one another. But of course, I'm not saying that the playing ground is even. It is not. But with this kind of intervention through personal network, transnational network, we can, in a sense, give a sense of balance to this very static, Kawayama's world system model. So it is around this network that knowledge centers can be built in the periphery, fostering a relationship between local and non-local, Western and non-Western scholars. It allows for mobility of scholars. As I say, we take IS, FAS, NUS. This is conducive to the grooming of local into transnational scholars. So the kind of seminar that we have here, this is a very transnational transaction. From Bangladesh, from Indonesia, from Norway, England, Vietnam, Hawaii, America. Come on, this is a privilege. And we're interacting, we are exchanging ideas. And later on, some of us will go back and phone each other and say, hey, look, I've got a research project, can we collaborate? And then, of course, in FAS, Institute of Asian Studies, 6 or 7 years ago, decided to open up this publishing series, Asia in Transition, Springer. And we have already about 6 or 7, including Katharina's latest, where she brought all her women writers in from Southeast Asia. Yeah. So again, it's a synergy, a transnational synergy, which then become realized in terms of publication. And therefore, the IAS works as a very strong, as a very important mediator of this transnational knowledge, of this knowledge forged between transnational scholars. So it cuts through the divide between East and West, between Asian and West. And I think we should have more of this. I think this is the way in which we should move forward. And we can also build research centers based on this. I noticed that the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Kyoto Center, even they have Japanese scholars, they also bring in a non-Japanese scholar. I think Katrina was there. I was there. Many of our scholars from the region, even from the West, are brought in also to give that synergy. So they're on the right track, that kind of template. And I think IS is doing the same thing. And FAS, I think, will probably follow suit. I think they're thinking of their own publication. So this is the kind of, I would say, the transnational social science tradition that we should use as a template to move forward, where it can bring in scholars from various disciplines as well in social science and various locations, away from nation-based, nation-state kind of national tradition, which can be quite problematic. But I'm not saying that a transnational tradition cannot also cater for national tradition. I think it is possible to do so. It can be quite complicated, but I think that those two can accommodate to one another. In my abstract, one of the things that I mentioned is that this is very much a biographical part of it, of this presentation is biographical. Is my own reflection of my journey as anthropologist. And I think I have to go back to a time of past when I first started anthropology. But it was more to do with education. In a sense, when I was born in a fishing village, and my father was born into a fishing community, but he, for some reason or the other, decided that fishing was not for him. He wanted to go to school. So of all the siblings, he was the youngest, who decided that schooling is for me. And through his education, he then became a teacher. At the time, it was during the British colonial period, and there was a certain school that catered for the peasantry, for those who come from the peasantry. Sultan Idris Training College. It was a college that trained Malays from the peasantry to become teachers with very rudimentary kind of education. Even they were taught how to make soil, good soil, because they were supposed to be sent back to the village to teach the Malay peasant to become good peasant. So I remember when my father, when I was in school, my father, kept insisting that I actually get involved with him in terms of making soil, from cow dung. Yeah, you mix that. I had to do that before I was able to escape and go and play games. So he taught all of that, and he grew fruit trees in school. And every morning when the students, line up, the first thing they had to do was go to their garden. They have a garden in which they plant and cultivate their own vegetables and all that. So, but my father, when he came back to the village, he was responsible in making my cousin to come to school. And all of them became teachers. There was a whole generation of teachers which came out in the village because of my father's insistence coming back, and basically forcing them to go to school. And of course, I was born in that family, and somehow or other, I was able to get a Commonwealth scholarship later on when I was in Form 6 to come to Australia. So this is the thing. I think one of the things that I learned, there was this early socialization into a kind of transnational thinking rather than national thinking. I was 14 years in Australia, sent to study geography, actually, human geography, not anthropology. Later on, I fell in love with anthropology and changed to anthropology from human geography. And that 4 years of undergraduate familiarized me with the Australian, with university education in Australia, and with having friends who are not of your own nationals. Then came the postgraduate. Now, the postgraduate was then also a very interesting time of being socialized into this, what I call transnational thinking. Because you were mixing with postgraduates from all over Southeast Asia, from Japan, from India, from Sri Lanka. And we're always together discussing issues that relate to our work, together with our Australian postgrad students. And we had to attend seminars. We have a very well-known Southeast Asian center in Monash at that time. And every week they would have a seminar. And there'll be visiting professors or postgraduate or lecturers giving seminar papers. And we would make a point to go and to get involved in the discussion. And at one point, when we were more confident, we had this, we just attended simply to stir up visiting professors, to ask them, tricky questions. Because Australia, you learn the art of not being polite. Yeah, Australia, they're very blunt. You just say what you say, and that's it, mate. So we learned that art of not taking criticism personally. Because in our country, when you criticize somebody in a seminar, they will take it very personally. They think it's a personal attack, whilst you are just criticizing their ideas. I noticed the same thing in Japan. Younger scholars cannot criticize their elders because it's not the done thing. But in Australia, it's the other way around. So a very blunt style of Austrian style. And then when we presented our paper, we also get hit in the same way. No holds barred. So this was a good training ground for me, in the sense of, as I say, trying to evolve to be a transnational kind of scholar. So I'm going to stop here. So I think what is important here is basically to create an alternative way, of handling this dichotomy between East and West, Asia and non-Asia, by taking a middle ground, which very much rests on the networking, personal networking of scholars, whether they be from the West or they be from Asia or from the non-West. And on the basis of this comradeship and partnership, we could evolve a different kind of paradigm shift in terms of social science scholarship in global society, what I call a transnational scholarship. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
AMERICA, 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 America. Very Hollywood, CNN, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Newsweek, Time Magazine, Tusker Dynasty, Kentucky, McDonald, Tarzan Rambo, Tarzan John Wayne, Comancheri, America, Ku mencari Amerika. Oh di mana Amerika? Oh di sini Amerika.